Hello, everybody, and welcome to Friday Art Break at the Getty Villa today. I'm Mary Louise Hart. I'm an antiquities curator at the Villa, and I'd like to welcome you to our decoding of an ancient Greek vase. I'm joining you from my home in Los Angeles on the traditional, ancestral, unceded territory of the Gabriela Tongva peoples, with honor and respect for the deep history of this region. The Getty Villa is one of the most amazing vases, both nationally and internationally, to look at ancient Greek vase painting. And I've invited my friend and colleague in theater and directing, plays at the Villa. He's directed Helen for us, he's directed an Oedipus for us, and many other things. I'd like to welcome Jon Lawrence Rivera to this session. Welcome, Jon.
Hi, Mary. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm looking forward to our conversation today. Thank you.
Can we have the next slide, please? This is the vase we're going to be looking at. Now, just a little short introduction to what these things are. This is an ancient Greek vase from the colonies of the Greeks in South Italy, Southern Italy. It's not an Athenian vase. It's a 4th century Western Greek comedy vase. And it comes out of an extremely vibrant culture of theatrical performance, both in tragedy and in comedy. It's important for you to understand that the Greeks painted their entire worlds onto these vases. Their gods, their mythology, their religion, and their many pleasures and their pursuits. And clearly, theater was one of their most passionate pursuits. This vase was used to mix the wine and the water at the Greek symposion, this drinking social that's so famous and that Plato wrote about. And because it's a large vase and it was used to actually mix the wine and the water, it would have been the centerpiece of a panoply of different vase shapes used in that drinking tradition on a table in the home of the owner. Now, even so, we know these things about it, but we don't know who the owner was. We don't know who the painter was. We don't know very much about any of it, and we certainly don't know the text of the play because none of these scripts have survived. But we do know something really important about it. We know they thought it was funny. Let's take a closer look. Vase paintings remain our primary source for the performance of ancient Greek comedy and tragedy. And about 200 of these vases have survived. They're in collections all over the world. And the representations demonstrate the popularity of a ribald kind of a slapstick local performance tradition featuring plot twists, which seem often to have revolved around the antics of the gods. The loves of Zeus was a very common one, something that we think is probably related to this phase. Also Dionysus, Hermes, and Heracles. Heracles, their favorite hero of all. Let me show you a different vase that has a really great slapstick on it. Can we have the next slide, please? This is a vase in the British Museum. It's not in our collection, but it's great because it shows you what the Greeks thought was funny. They didn't think the myths was funny. Myths aren't particularly funny. Myths are hieratic. But what the actors did with those myths on the stage was what is painted on these vases. So here we have the myth of the old wise centaur Chiron, who's got this big, huge mask with ears on it and white hair in the middle of it. Chiron, as you know, is a centaur, and that means he's a half horse and half man. So this costume would have been worn by 2 actors, one in the front and one in the back. And we've all seen a horse costume in our own days. Chiron had been infected with a wound, and so he had to go to the sanctuary of Apollo to be cleansed. This shows him going up the stairs to the sanctuary to be met by a slave figure. And in the middle of going up the stairs, this fellow that you see on the back is the actor who played the back end of the centaur. And what he's done is he's thrown off the back end of the centaur costume, and he's jumped out and started pushing that actor in the front. All right, he's playing with the illusionistic aspect of theater, and they do seem to like to draw attention to their own antics on the stage. So this is what it is. It's what the actor is doing. So Chiron does go up to in the story. He goes up to the sanctuary, and in the meantime, you've got these two women here on the right. These women are labeled nymphs. Now, there's a very famous spring at Delphi at the bottom of the hill before you go up to the temple, where anyone who goes to Delphi has to wash themselves, cleanse themselves before they go to speak with the god. And these nymphs are usually lovely things. They're like a breath of spring. They're delicate and sensual, and they dance. And these women are sitting there pointing with their hands, see their gestures of their fingers. They have masks they're wearing that are big, thick lips. Their mouths are open. They're gossiping. They're talking about what's going on down below. In classics, there is a particular word called flyax, P-H-L-Y-A-X. That's used to talk about these vases. They're called flyax vases. The style of performance was invented in the 5th century in Sicily. And this word flyax is said to indicate this kind of a tragic burlesque performance. But the word is interesting because it really means soft and flabby, is what the word means. And so scholars these days are trying to get away from it a little bit. But it means soft and flabby, not only in the costumes, which I'll describe in a moment, but also in the language. Like it means a blabbering language or a non-specific way of talking. And it can even go to mean gossip. Let's look at the next slide when you can see a few theaters. There on the left is a map of South Italy and Sicily that shows you just two. There are literally dozens and dozens of theaters across Southern Italy, Sicily, and Greece, of course. I just thought I would show you what two of them look like. One on the right, the larger image, is a reconstructed theater at a place called Metaponto in Italy, or Heraclea in Italy. The one on the left is from Metaponto. The one on, which is a sanctuary. That one is more of a religious experience, a religious theater. The one on the right is an urban theater. These theaters were about the size to enclose all the citizens of the cities that they served. So that when cities went there, when all of the citizens went there, all of the citizens went there, and they would all be together and they would all see one another along with the play. So these were very civic events that meant a great deal to the inhabitants of the city. The vases then document these events, and they go from Apulia to Campania to Paestum and to Syracuse. All of the theaters document a rich and a very popular tradition for comic performance with its own specific style of stagecraft and costumes. And I'd like to bring Jon in here now, because I've already talked a lot. Jon, how does public performance like this come into your experience?
Well, the interesting thing about the vase that you showed earlier is that the actual scene that's happening is really quite funny, and the way that you describe the action of it, the horse, the revelation, and all of that stuff, I find it so fascinating, and truly it's funny in the way that it's depicted. But for me, the thing that really intrigued me the most are the two women on the upper right side of that vase who were gossiping. And it reminds me of a time when I was growing up, especially during this month of May, when we were there's a festival called Santa Cruzan, or Flores de Mayo. If we can go to the next image, please. You see, the festival itself is not funny. Actually, it's quite serious because it honors the finding of the true cross by Helena of Constantinople and Constantine the Great. But the women that are in the parade are from the neighborhood, and they've been selected by a group of people, and they are not really revealed through the parade. As the parade starts with all the princesses and queens, they're not really revealed until the actual parade. And the last queen would be Reina Elena, which is, Queen Helen. And uh, and the the thing that I find intriguing about the vase and the relationship to Santa Cruzan is, can we go to the next image, please? Is that the two women in the vase who are gossiping? I remember growing up in the Philippines as a young boy, looking at this festival and watching these parade of women and young ladies through the streets of Manila. That the women, particularly, and some of them actually are my relatives, who would be whispering and gossiping about the women that would come down the parade route, and in particular the one who is going to be the Reina Elena, because she's supposed to be the most beautiful, the most stunning of all of the ladies in the neighborhood. And of course, the ladies would gossip and say, "Ay, bakit siya? Bakit siyang pinili?" And saying, "Why did they choose her? Why her? Why not the other person? Why not the person in front of her?" So the vase actually reminded me of that kind of gossiping, which made me laugh so much when I was growing up. And as you can see in this picture, all the people around taking pictures and looking at the parade, some of them are already whispering to each other, and they don't whisper softly. They actually whisper quite loudly so people can hear what they're saying. So that's what really brought me to this image. Next image, please.
So, so what is the scene, do you think, on this phase? Now that we know there was performance, we think it could be parody of a myth. What do you think how do you think this staging can inform us more about a play for which we have no script?
Yeah, to me, what is interesting about this vase is that there seemed to be a ruse that was devised. Somehow, the character on the left and on the right must have had some kind of pact or some kind of mechanism that they had created to deceive the person on the right. And to me, when the character on the right is out with his arms outstretched, feels like to me saying, "Aha, I found out you're not the person that you said," or whatever the revelation is. And I thought that the characters on the left and the right, which are all both looking at each other, had this moment of, "Uh-oh, we've been found out. What do we do next?" So I feel like that's like the one of the the scenario that might be happening here. And perhaps the revelation happened because of a costume malfunction or something, that somebody was covering up, and then this flourish of the fabric above the central character feels like it has been revealed. And so that to me feels very comedic, in the way that it's been discovered.
Well,
Next image.
let's take a little bit of a closer look at each of these figures individually, and that will help. If we can have the next slide. All right, first starting from the left. So this is a very popular costume because this is the costume that makes fun of a hero figure. Um, a general way to look at these things is to understand that playing the other against the ideal is part of the joke. It's like a major framework for the comedy. So the costume this actor is wearing, and don't forget, they're all male actors. The costume he's wearing a face mask, probably with the hair wig attached to it. These are full head masks. And it has these bulbous eyes, big fat nose, and an open mouth, so he's speaking. His body costume shows that he's fat and slovenly. He has a big belly. He has a big butt. He's got man boobs. He's got wearing like pajamas that are all wrinkled. is not proper at all. And you will notice that every single one of these costumes, aside from the female one, all of these costumes have as an essential part of them this dangling phallus, which they thought was one of the funniest parts of the whole getup, apparently. Play that next to the Getty bronze. On the right, you have what every youthful Greek, an ideal that everyone would want to reach this kind of a position. He's crowning himself after winning an athletic victory. His musculature is taut and toned. His body is bronzed and beautiful, and he's standing in an existential posture that is perfect. His hair is coiffed, and he is the ideal hero. So this is the kind of figure that the man on the left is playing some kind of a hero or an athletic ideal. And can we have the next slide, please? Now in the center is going to be on the right. This is a male actor, and there were male actors who specialized in female roles in ancient Greece. This particular mask is of an old crone, scraggly white hair, female. She's wearing a costume that is a play off of a very normal Khitan Himation costume, except you can see the body underneath is very big. And she's very ugly features. And yet there is this lovely, lovely sort of an idea of a beautiful linen piece of fabric that's wafting in a breeze above her. That kind of fabric is what you usually see associated with a figure like the one on the left, who's on view on one of our vases at the villa. This is a lovely Athenian maiden in a very, very beautifully woven and embroidered outfit with a lot of decoration on it, including the idea of expensive jewelry surrounding her head, which the woman on the right could have been wearing. She has an empty ear, she has an empty neck. She's not wearing any kind of ornaments at all. And she's looking at this man on the left. Now, on the far right comes, next slide, please. On the far right comes in what must be a Zeus figure, but he's gesturing to the two figures to the left. His mouth is open, he's missing teeth, he has a totally scraggly beard, googling eyes. Again, he has, the sloppy costume and the fat body and the dangling phallus that is part of the comedic costume. But let's compare him to the great treasure of the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, the spectacular Artemisian Zeus, who again is perfection in human form. Look at his beard contrasted to the comic beard. Look at his hair contrasted to the dinky little crown that's on top of that fellow. Look at the way he stands, still and confident in his divinity. I mean, you couldn't get more different than this. That's why they thought it was funny to portray him as a googly old slovenly king who's maybe out for that woman in the middle until she turns around and he sees that she isn't a beautiful old woman, but instead a fat old crone. Can we have the next slide, please? And now that we've circled back here, I really want to bring Jon back in to ask about humor, about being a director, and about why is comedy funny, when is it funny, and how does it relate to these kinds of scenes?
Yeah, I mean, thank you, Mary. To me, I feel that comedy is really at its best when the audience is sort of like carried along into the ruse. I feel that there is something really genius about making sure that the audience knows what is happening throughout the process. Just like in modern times when Robin Williams, for instance, was doing Mrs. Doubtfire, the audience is privy to the information than the other characters in the movie. So you get to see him dress up, you get to see him, put the makeup on and the dress on. and the audience follows along, and it's really funny because we're all following along all the mishaps that happen, and and how is he going to conceal himself, and so you follow all of that throughout the movie, and in plays where there are revelations and concealing and putting on different costumes. Once the audience are really like brought into that, it gives the sense of being part of the comedy and being part of the trick. So I always find that there's a lot of comic geniuses now, like Eddie Murphy, like Jim Carrey, like Robin Williams, who really came from a very long, obviously, history that came from Greek theater, of costuming and revelations, which which brings me to a Filipino comic genius, Dolphy. Next image, please. Uh, so when I was growing up in the Philippines, we would watch Dolphy every week on his TV show, and and there's always the show always had these mistaken identity, all of these things that happen. Some people are hiding things, and then they gets found out, and so it has a it's really been one of those TV shows that we all watched, and because I came from a third world country where everything is so poor, that the half hour show that Dolphy is in, like, we watch and we sort of like forget all of our troubles for that time. Can we go to the next image, please? So there was this one episode that I want to share that really exemplifies the kind of comedy that Dolphy is so good at. He's like he his comedy is broad, but it's not slapstick. I mean, it is always rooted into the truth and into it's something that is really honest. There is this episode that I saw when I was growing up, where he had prepared a beautiful fried fish, and it was like a nice sized fish that he put in the center of the table, and he and his family of the wife and two kids or whatever, they all sat down around the table, and he started to scoop rice for everybody. So everybody had a scoop of rice, and all he would command them to do is to look at the fish and then eat, so that it feels like you're already eating the fish, but you're not. Don't touch the fish, just look at it and eat. So he would command it to everybody at the table, one look, one rice. So they would eat. Then it goes one look, rice, one look, one rice. And one of the children lingers to the fish for a few more seconds after he said one look, rice. And when the kid was lingering for a little longer, Dolphy slaps him in the head and says, "Hey, leave some for everybody else. Don't finish it all for yourself." So it is just it's a really, I don't know why I remember this scene, because it's been, I mean, I haven't been in the Philippines since the mid 70s, and but I remember this moment so distinctly because it really reflected, exemplified the resilience of Filipino people to find humor in their circumstances, and and somehow I found that really refreshing, and really something that is inspiring in a way, because it's really about people making fun of the situation when people are so poor and have no other choices, but you find humor in that. So it's been that has always been a part of my memory of the Philippines.
Well, thank you, John. I think we have some really interesting questions here. I really want to thank you for your generous participation in this program. It's been great to work with you, and really interesting to hear your responses and to bring this idea of comedy and Filipino comedy in. I don't think that we would ever have thought we would see Dolphy and Zeus together on the same stage. but but there it is. There it is.
Yeah.
In fact, why don't we start with a question from Shelby Brown about Dolphy's humor and whether it reflected the exaggeration and physical burlesque of Greek comedy. So I think there is something into that probably.
Yeah, I mean, there, Dolphy has, ran the gamut of comedy, right? So, he had those scenes. He had those scenes where, where he would put on also a dress and hide behind a dress and have exaggerated moments. And the interesting thing about that kind of event is that uh, the audience, somehow the audience is so convinced that he is going to be caught by the other people around him in the scene, and yet in the scene nobody seemed to recognize him other than what he pretends to be. So if he's wearing a woman's dress and he's a woman, everybody just assumes he's a woman. And so in Greek theater, and in the way that Dolphy did it, and in the way that uh, Robin Williams did it, the exaggerated features which we recognize watching the play or the movie or the TV show, we recognize it, and yet the characters inside don't. And so that's what makes it really funny, right? Because it's like there is this exaggerated gesture that is being performed, and the audience knows that it's an exaggeration, and yet it's funny because the characters inside of that play or inside of that scene are not aware of the joke. They just see Dolphy or Robin Williams as a female character, and no matter how we even the audience feels like, oh my goodness, they can see that he's an imposter, and yet the characters buy it, and when they buy it, then we laugh, and we it's comedic gold to, to have those kinds of moments.
And we have to remember that the ancient Greeks knew what these stories were when they went to see them played on stage. This
Yeah.
wasn't like a premiere.
Yes.
So they knew what the stories were, and they went to see them again and to laugh and maybe to see their favorite actor coming on stage, coming to town. But what you said about bodies kind of leads me to another question that we have here from an anonymous attendee, which says some of the body humor in these plays is inappropriate from a modern perspective. Certainly true. Do you think the audience thought old age or unattractive features were truly funny, or are these tools to make fun of supposedly more ideal people or gods? And I mean, obviously, no, I think they respected old age very much. And um, they definitely are tools. They played the other against the ideal. I think that in terms of satyr plays as well, they really like to try to turn around and skewer ideals and to skewer great gods. And we may think of them sometimes as overly attentive to the needs and the rituals and the appearance of the gods, but theater is where they could let that out.
Yeah.
Um,
I think, Mary, there's a question that perhaps you might be able to respond to. How did the comedy and tragedy play against one another in Greek festivals? It seems like such a complete contrast to switch gears like this.
Well, I would say they did not exactly play against one another. They both played. They each had their own days. For example, in Athens, there would be 3 days for the tragedies. Started out with only tragedies, and the comedy festival was actually at a different time of year originally. So they really were separate. But then at a certain point, the comedy came into the major Dionysiac festival, and it was played on its own day in competition. It was played separately. So they were a little bit separated. by the time of the 4th century, when we have these vase that are not Athenian, it was a more commercial, I have the sense that it was a much more, maybe not exactly commercial, but a much more popular event, and there were festivals. And the players seem to have gone around and set up their stages in the theaters. So it was much less religiously um, conservative than it had been in, say, 5th century Athens. Let's see.
Yeah. There's another question about, are these images considered irrelevant by today's standards?
Irreverent.
Yeah.
Irreverent. Well, um, I guess it depends upon the viewer.
That's what
I
I
mean,
would say. Yeah.
I don't find the dangling phallus so hysterical myself, I must say. But but they did, clearly. Who would have been at these plays? Certain groups of people, not allowed to watch. Well, uh, um, yes, generally women were not allowed to watch. The theaters were built for the number of citizens in the city. And it seems, though, that there is some evidence that by the 4th century, women were starting to go to the theater. It's not completely clear, but it is generally thought that that was the case.
My good
I'd
friend,
like to,
yeah, go ahead.
Norman.
Yeah,
No,
my
go
good
ahead.
friend Norman Frisch has a question about my staging of Euripides' Helen, which I staged at the Getty Villa, and he's remembering that some of the staging involves slapstick and disguise. And you have good memory, Norman. Yeah, yes, there was a lot of that. The adaptation that Nick Salamone did for the Getty Villa was was a true adaptation of the Euripides version of it, and there was a lot of slapstick and disguise. How Helen hides the guns, and how she's pretending that there's death and has to go to the out into the water. There's a lot of that thing that we used throughout that play, and that's obviously something that Nick, the playwright, did not did not hide from, and certainly we embraced that and used it into the play, and which we had such a wonderful time with.
It was a great success.
Yeah,
It
thank
really
you.
was. Let's see, any more questions? So it sounds like for women, the only way they could see a comedy would have been on a vase. Well, that is a very good observation. So presumably the men would tell the story to them with the vase as a tool. Yeah, I think that these scenes were painted so that they could look at them and talk about how funny the experience was. And I imagine they would talk to their wives about that. I think that's a good idea. Women did never participated as actors ever. And there is a question from Jill Klein that came in quite early. Weren't those women actually men? If it looks as though they have whiskers, those would have been whiskers on the masks. And if they were female, then it's supposed to be another way to make her look ugly, is to show her with whiskers.
Mary, there's another question about were there Greek comedies that were political satires? If so, how did the politicians react to them?
Well, the thing is, we don't have any scripts. So, so it's kind
We
of
only
hard
have
to
basics.
answer that question, but as we all know from Greek culture, everything was political. Absolutely everything was political. So virtually. So I can't say yay or nay to that, but politics was never far from that place where they were performing. John, did Dolphy's faces correspond in some way to masks or stand for characters?
Yeah, I mean, I think you know, there his face was so agile. It just
So expressive.
shaped it every time. So I think, you know, he has the capacity to really reveal so much with just his facial reaction, whether it is something that was, you know, a sad moment or a happy moment, or you know, or something that would just be um you know, a discovery of some sort that was really funny. So he was able to really convey so much with just his face, with just the way he looked, the way that he would interact with people. So I almost feel like, yes, that he would that he had that capacity to stand.
Um, well, why were women excluded? I'm glad this was asked. So just to be really specific about it, in general in ancient theater, no respectable woman would be seen in the theater, as well as, it's not like they were banging on the door to go. It was not appropriate um, for a respectable woman really to be outside except for to do religious, to take care of the tomb of the dead in the family. Women did not show themselves. So it's a larger topic than that. Um, and masks, that's another good question. How did voices project through the mask? A lot of people would like to know this. There are no masks that have survived because they were made from fragile, like linen and perishable materials. There have been some scholars who thought that there might have been some kind of a mouthpiece inside of them. But you know, when you look at the mouths of the people talking, those mouths are open really far. And in real life, I would suspect that the linen weavings would have become looser, and I think those mouth areas were really pretty open for the most part, and they did have to shout through them apparently. Um,
Um,
let's see.
is there a YouTube channel for Dolphy? Virginia, I think if you just Google Dolphy, some of those images will show up, and some clips will show up, and also it might give you a list of some of his films that are available through streaming. You know, they are available, and only one name, Dolphy. There's no last name. I mean, he has a last name, but he's like Cher or Madonna. He only goes by Dolphy. So he was really quite popular in the Philippines. He's gone now, but he. You know, when I was growing up, he was the king of comedy. He was our, you know, he was our Robin Williams of our time. So
It's amazing
yeah,
how famous he was
yeah.
there. Just I see a question here from Bill Zawadsky, who's a good friend of the villa, who's asking, were these comic vases used at the symposium or at the grave? And I would say at both of them, because every vase that we have exists because it was in a grave in southern Italy. Is there an archaeological find spot for any of them? Well, each particular vase has its own provenance and provenience. But what's interesting about the burials we have found that have vases in them, they have comedy vases, they have tragedy vases, they have mythological vases, and there's always an assortment in some of these very rich graves. Something that's important to remember about the areas of southern Italy and Sicily was that there were local indigenous populations there, and that the people who made these vases are the Greeks who colonized places like Syracuse, and even Lecce, like today. The Greeks are so pervasive, there is still a version of Greek spoken in these areas. Um, the tombs that the vases are found in are local tombs. So the locals were integrating with this kind of theater there. So you have two very different populations. It's not even clear they really spoke the same language. And it's a very, very important field of research. There's a scholar named Tom Carpenter, if you want to look up more about this. Um, it's really quite fascinating and something that's very current in scholarship today. Did Greeks have to go to big cities? The theater behind me isn't even in a city. It's in a sanctuary called Epidavros or Epidaurus, which is on the Peloponnesus of Athens. It's a healing sanctuary. It holds about 14,000 people. And the, every city of a certain size, and they weren't big, you didn't have to be in Athens to go to the play. Every community needed its theater. It needed its theater to congregate in, to be together. And in Epidaurus, it needed its theater in order to heal. However, we have no idea what was ever performed in this theater behind me, this spectacular, this is the largest theater in Greece.
Mary, we have time for one more question. Should we go with Tom's question? When were the plays written so that they could be reproduced, or were they ever? And if so, how were they interpreted just from vase imagery?
Well, the only comic plays we have that were recorded are the Athenian ones by Aristophanes and other, and there are fragments and Scholiast notes of the existence of other plays around that. We don't have, we know of a playwright called Rhinthon, Rhinthon, who was a playwright in 5th century Syracuse, Sicily, who was said to have invented this genre of tragic comedy. We really don't know much about him, and we certainly don't have a play about that. So that's why I wanted to bring up the idea, you know, of Jon as a director coming into this conversation to see if we could try to find the script within the play. And I think that, you know, we have done that a little bit, about as much as we can. And I'm really grateful, Jon, to your participation. It's been a lot of fun to work with you on this, and we've really enjoyed it. I hope everybody has. And I wish you a very good weekend. I want to thank our public programming group for the Villa, who has put this together and helped Jon and I get through a webinar process. And I look forward to watching Artbreak in the future. Thanks for coming, and come visit the Villa as soon as you can. We're open.
Thank you very much, everyone.